Just to give you a little context on Barnabas, this guy shows up 6 different times in the book of Acts, okay? He shows up first here. He leads the church in generosity. He shows up again in Acts chapter 9. In Acts chapter 9, the Apostle Paul, in Acts chapter 8, the Apostle Paul is converted to Christianity. Before that, the Apostle Paul was trying to wipe Christianity off the face of the earth. He hated Christians. He hated the church. So he got, I want to kill all of them. Well, he meets Jesus, resurrected from the dead, on the road to Damascus. He becomes a Christian. And obviously, as a Christian, he says, well, I've got to do ministry. And so he starts trying to plant churches and spread the gospel. And you can imagine the Christian people looked at the Apostle Paul and said, not my house, not my party, you can't come. Barnabas is the first guy to look at the Apostle Paul and say, hey, let's give this guy a chance. Yeah, I know he killed your uncle, but the Lord is gracious. The Lord forgives him. The Lord is going to use him in a powerful way, obviously, so I think we should let him in. Barnabas believed in people. And so they let the Apostle Paul in, and tremendous things happen as a result. Barnabas is the first guy to pastor the first non-Jewish church. In Acts chapter 11, the Antioch church is born. The Antioch church was the first church with non-Jewish members in it. You guys remember this. We looked at this earlier this year. 2 people, they weren't even pastors. They decide, if Jesus wants us to take the gospel to the whole world, then why are we only preaching to Jews? Let's go preach to some of the non-Jewish people. So they preach to some of the non-Jewish people. Tons of people get saved in Antioch, and a church is born. Who's the first pastor? Barnabas. And Barnabas leads that church in generosity. He leads that church to be the first church with great diversity. The leadership, their staff had all kinds of different people from all kinds of different nations. He led that. He was the one who led an effort to take money from the Antioch church and give it to the Jerusalem church. The reason they probably didn't have any money is because they gave it all away. But so, and a famine hit, and so the Antioch church was going to give and meet their needs. Barnabas was always leading in generosity, always leading and helping the church be diverse, helping God's people catch God's heart, advance God's mission. That's just who Barnabas was. The first missionary journey, the first mission trip took place out of Antioch. Antioch sent the first group of missionaries. Guess who they were? Paul and Barnabas. He was the first guy to go. And John Mark. And John Mark, halfway through the mission trip, he kind of checks out. He gets scared, says, I can't do this anymore. So he leaves, which obviously upsets Paul and probably upset Barnabas. But it was Barnabas who told Paul, we need to restore John Mark. He wants to come back in. And for Paul, for as much as Paul preaches about grace, he wasn't very gracious in that moment, because he said, no way, I'm not taking John Mark. And so Paul and Barnabas split their ways. Barnabas went with John Mark, and Paul went with Silas, and of course doubled the expansion of the church. But that's besides the point. What I'm trying to illustrate is that Barnabas, he held loose God's stuff, and he held tight onto God's people. He was always lifting people up. He was giving people a second chance. He is a model of a gospel-transformed man. He's not a preacher. He's not an apostle. He's not a professional. He's just a man transformed by the good news of the gospel, and it radically changed his life. And God used him in incredible ways as a result.